Hi, I'm George Finney, and I'm here to help you be more well aware when it comes to cybersecurity. And this week, we're talking about the habit of diligence. Diligence is actually the sixth out of the nine cybersecurity habits. And the theme for this week is every day is game day when it comes to cybersecurity. We'll touch on why that is in just a moment. But first, a story. We start every week out with a story about someone who kind of is an exemplar of the nine cybersecurity habits. And this week is no exception. This week, we're talking about James Burke. Burke was actually the CEO of Johnson and Johnson for actually a long time. And you'll see he's smiling here. He actually won the U.S. Presidential Medal of Freedom Award for one of the things that we're about to talk about. In 1982, there was a serial killer hunting folks in the Chicago area, and this particular serial killer. He didn't kill people with a gun or a knife or any of those other things. He actually used Tylenol. At the time, Tylenol came in capsules. So you could take those little capsules apart, pour out what was in it, and put something else in. Actually, I think it was 7 or 8 folks died because they swallowed Tylenol that actually had cyanide inside, what they thought was Tylenol. A whole family passed away, all kind of in the same day, along with several other people who got bottles. The police obviously, were very concerned. They kind of triangulated where these folks had bought their Tylenol to stores in the Chicago area. And so, what they think is that the serial killer just took the pills out of a Tylenol box, put the poison pills back in, and left it on the shelf for someone to buy and eventually take. And this is actually a horrible way to die. Cyanide actually will start making you throw up. After a few hours, you'll start having seizures, and eventually your heart will just give out. It's a terrible way to die. The problem was they didn't know who it was or how far it was going to go. Johnson & Johnson cooperated with the FBI, and what the FBI told the CEO Burke was that they should do a recall, but because the killer was limited to the Chicago area, they said, well, it's voluntary, but if you could recall, just the product in and around the Chicago area, that would be great. So I want to pause at this point and just think about your own position. And I bring this example up because it's very similar to a data breach, right? A company, in this case Johnson & Johnson, is being used as an intermediary in order to victimize its customers. So what would you do if you were in Burke's shoes? Would you follow the advice given by the FBI to not to do the recall? Would you do more? Would you do less? How would you handle it? And the interesting thing is what Burke said is actually the decision they made was very easy, and it goes to their creed. So I'll read the creed, but Johnson & Johnson believes that it's their responsibility. Their first responsibility is to doctors, nurses, patients, mothers and fathers, and everyone who uses their product and services. And so when Burke came in the 1970s, one of the things they did is they thought, okay, well, this is actually just the first paragraph of the credo. It's about 4 paragraphs long. It's about a page long. And he did what most leaders do when they come into the organization. They have a look at their mission or their vision, um, and maybe they'll dust it off. Maybe they'll start over. Make some updates to change with the times. And it was interesting because this is actually the original creed that Johnson and Johnson started out with. It's been this way for a long time, and they decided as an organization after looking at it that they were going to keep it the same. They weren't going to make a single change, and this really reflected their values so deeply that what Burke did when they were looking at this case of poison Tylenol is they said, we're actually going to do a recall nationwide. We're going to pull all Tylenol off all the shelves everywhere, all at the same time. And what they did is they began innovating with safety in mind. This again is 1982. There were no child safety caps. There were no safety seals. Tamper-proof containers weren't really in use for medications. And they pioneered gel caps. At the time, these capsules could be pulled apart. So they pioneered new kinds of delivering medications that couldn't be tampered with in the same way. And I think this vision it was really important because there were a lot of actual copycats that did the same thing that serial killer was doing all across the country very soon afterwards. And so Tylenol, really became the kind of the starting point for a lot of reform around medication safety. And Johnson and Johnson, in particular Burke, were really the pioneers of that movement, and it all started with this creed. And so, in your organization, how do you capture what your values are? How do you know when and how you're going to react when you get into a situation relative to cybersecurity? You really have to go back to your core values, and you have to have a plan in place. You have to know, before you go into that, what you're going to do. And we capture that by doing tabletop exercises, by having policy, by having vision and mission statements, so that people can rely on the values that they have when they're in the stressful moment of having to make an incredibly major decision like that. And I think the quote that really resonates with me, Samuel Johnson, what we hope ever to do with ease, we must learn first to do with diligence. And so, really that diligence started not in 1982 for Burke, but all the way going back when he first became CEO, looking at that creed, thinking about what their values are, and doing that every day. They say practice makes perfect, but really, that's what diligence is. It's coming up with a plan. It's revising those plans, thinking about it, and making sure everyone has a seat at the table to participate in that conversation. Not necessarily that they're going to override it, but they feel like they have a seat at the table, and they feel like they understand and have heard all of the sides, so that they can internalize that message. And again, thinking about what Tylenol looks like today versus what it looked like 40 years ago, it does look very different. And I think, again, the future of cybersecurity in 5 or 10 years will look very different than it does today. Cybersecurity 10 years ago, the tools that we have today that we take for granted didn't exist 10 years ago. And I think that trend will continue. And so the message to me is that we have to rely on values, on connection with our communities in order to do that. And we do that through the habit of diligence. And I think diligence, out of all of the habits, diligence, represents, kind of the intentionality of thinking about your habits, not in the moment when you have to do them, but planning and being prepared for doing that. And so that habit, I think, is critical to as a habit to develop on itself. So I know we're talking about cybersecurity, and I talked before about meditation, so I know this is probably a lot more touchy-feely of a conversation than than maybe you expected. But we're going to talk about journaling for a second. So in the 1990s, there was a psychologist, Dr. Sheena Orbell. She was just starting her career, and so she wanted to look at a research project that focused on elderly patients, in particular elderly patients who'd just gone through hip replacement surgery. So I hope you never have to have a hip replacement surgery, but the outlook is pretty grim for you if you go through that. A good percentage, a large percentage, of those patients will die after having your hip replaced. I was walking across our campus, I think about 10 years ago, and I saw one of our professors, an elderly woman, fall, and she tripped, and I rushed to kind of help get her back up, and she couldn't move, and she knew instantly that her hip had been shattered, and so I helped her kind of get back on her feet, not literally, but figuratively. Waited with her, until the ambulance came, and it was one of those things. She kind of just tripped on her own feet. She had a little bag she was carrying, and I think that's what happened. But the healing process for that is incredibly important. So once you have a hip replaced, you have to start exercising immediately, no matter how much it hurts. And that's really the determining factor on whether you're going to survive at all. And that's kind of scary. But so what Dr. Orbell did is she went to Scotland and recruited a group of elderly patients to find out what might be able to help. And so she studied lots of different ways. But the project that she came up with was to give them a blank notebook. And so every day they had to fill in their recovery goals for the day. And so just doing that, that's all the patients did. They wrote about how they handle their pain when it happened, when they were doing an exercise or what have you, what pills they would take. And so just that one change, just journaling about that recovery process led to just an unbelievable outcome. So after 3 months, the patients who had completed writing their goals in a journal were able to walk unassisted 3 times faster than the other patients, and they'd started to walk twice as fast. So they were able to get out of their wheelchair and walk unassisted 3 times faster, and they were able to walk twice as fast as the other patients, right? All just by writing stuff down on a piece of paper. Just like with the patients, I think keeping a journal about what you would do relative to security, writing down your goals, to how you will handle future situations and setbacks, will lead to a dramatic change in your preparedness. So ask yourself, what are you going to do if you get a scam phone call on your cell phone that pretends to be Microsoft or Apple? What do you do if your computer crashes and you lose all your information, your family photos? What do you do if you forget a password and can't remember it and can't get access to your account? So again, writing down, they think that writing stuff down in a journal reinforces your experiences, right? It makes you relive them twice. So you learn from them faster than if you hadn't written anything down at all. And so this is the point in the story where I talk about Jerry Maguire. So if you've seen the movie Jerry Maguire, right? This is the famous photo where he says, "Show me the money." But before that, right, the turning point in Jerry Maguire's career, one day he decides to write, his mission statement. And he sends his mission statement to all of his colleagues in the agent firm that he works for, and they all think that he's crazy, right? He actually wrote a 25-page kind of a manifesto titled "The Things We Think and Do Not Say," which, again, you can kind of understand his colleagues, perceptions that maybe he is a little crazy, but they actually released the 25-page manifesto for Jerry Maguire a few years ago, so you can read it online. But that process, right, that gave him purpose. That gave him a direction in his career and his life. And if you believe the story, the storybook story in a movie, that internalization, changed his career. And at least he seems to be much more fulfilled. And I think that resonates with me in my life as well, right? That when I can connect my passion with making a difference, and my values with how I live my life, that is really the determining factor for success. And so what I've started to say is that the difference between an amateur and a professional is that the professional has a plan, right? It's not necessarily that one gets paid and one doesn't. It's not, an amateur could just be having fun and having a hobby. An amateur might be getting paid, but not really have a plan on what they're going to do with a career. Whereas a professional, they know what they need to do in terms of exercise. They need to, their drills. All of that preparation is going to go into whatever it is that they're doing. And so, I thought that I had attributed this to someone else, another writer, and I went back and looked, and it actually wasn't in his book. So I've looked, and I think this is actually something that I can attribute to myself. But if you've heard it before, let me know. At this point, I've written so many things, I can't keep track of what I've written, apparently. But so I think where I take this to the next level is this idea of practicing random acts of cybersecurity. And so stay with me here. So journaling is one thing. How plan for what can go wrong, what your goals are, what the next thing you're going to do is. But so you've probably heard of the saying, random acts of kindness. And so, that actually was created in 1982, ironically, again, the same year that the Tylenol situation happened. But about 20 years after the thought process for random acts of kindness came out, a psychologist, Dr. Sonia Lubomowski, and I'm probably butchering her name, decided to study it and to see if she could prove whether random acts of kindness really made the world a better place. And so the research paper that she produced, there was a trick. It wasn't really random. So at night, every night, subject had to create a plan for what they would do in certain situations, again, similar to journaling. But when the opportunity came up, whatever that opportunity looked like, they could take it. So it wasn't necessarily, planning for what they could do, but looking for an opportunity. So, tomorrow, you might bring up, your random act could be, if it comes up in conversation, I'm going to talk to someone about, evangelizing for getting a password vault, password manager like LastPass. Your advocacy random act tomorrow could be to if you see a car, with its door open, you can close it and contact the owner and let them know that their car door was open. Those kinds of things, the random acts of security, there's an intentionality there that you're going to do a random act of security in a week. And her research actually suggested that the greater the intention, the bigger the result, especially in the short term. And so the other significant factor was the variety of acts that they plan to do during the week. So variety and different kinds of random acts really helped cement the long-term lasting effects of that random planned activity. So there's a variety of acts that I talk about in the book Well Aware. And awareness training really helps this, but really giving people an active opportunity to do those things and to live them. Um, you know, Really, that's where I think we can make the most difference. But there is one thing that I think we need to be aware of, which is this concept called training scars. Um, and so these studies actually go back to 40 or 50 years. What they found is, police would go train on shooting ranges. And this goes back to the time of revolvers, when that was the police issued standard. Um, and so they would go practice and practice. But one of the things that you learn on the practice area is that you don't want to have your unspent brass casings, lying on the ground for someone to trip over. And so what some police officer would do is, if you are familiar at all with a revolver, you can, it doesn't eject the cartridges one at a time. You'll shoot your 5 or 6 shots depending on what kind of firearm you're carrying. And then you open up the cylinder and pull out the spent cartridges. And what these police officers would do, instead of like sweeping them up or throwing them on the ground, they'd put them in their pocket, right? Just kind of as a polite gesture to other officers. And what they found actually is, after some firefights, they found police officers who had these, who had been shot in the line of duty. They'd find police officers with unspent casings in their pockets, right? So they'd form these habits, and potentially in the heat of the moment, when they are in a life or death situation, those habits actually turned out to be bad, but they were unintentional consequences of the training. And I think we also need to think about the consequences of being diligent, or diligent in unintentional ways. So I think training scars are especially important to understand in cybersecurity, because maybe you're creating incentives to do certain things. And I think if you incentivize, for example, giving a bonus if there are no security events witnessed, in a given year, well, actually, is that creating a perverse incentive to not underreport, or to not report certain malicious activities, right? So, again, think about training scars in terms of your diligence plan for what might happen, and change up your training, right? Have a variety of training, and that's the way they do modern police shooting training today, is to put them in a variety of situations, and kind of force them to think differently. And so, okay, mistakes are going to be made. This is actually Tom Watson Jr., who was the CEO of IBM. And there's this famous story where Watson, before he was named CEO, was called into the office, and he had made a mistake, and that mistake cost the company $1 million. This comes from Edgar Schein's book on IBM. And so, Watson came into the CEO's office at the time expecting to be fired. And actually, what the CEO told him is, "Oh my gosh, no! Why would I fire you? I've just spent $1 million training you on how not, how not to do that." And so, I think we also have to be careful about this idea of scapegoating in cybersecurity. It's easy to point fingers and to assign blame. And why do we do that? We do that because we're afraid. And actually, I think those people that have been through a breach, that have been through those experiences, are in the best position sometimes to be able to learn from them and grow the company along with you. So, certainly there are cases where negligence, is just goes too far, and I think you have to kind of weigh that balance. But again, you have to understand that mistakes are going to be made. There are going to be training scars that you have, and what's the right thing to do in order to protect the company. It's continuing to mature and grow, not to point to an individual and say, if we get rid of you, we're going to be that much better. Because if you fire your CEO, right, CEOs can click on phishing messages. CEOs can make mistakes. And I think it's about, again, recognizing that all of us are on the same team, and we can make a difference together. We can make a bigger difference together. So getting back to this concept of every day is game day in cybersecurity. So I actually wear a suit every day to work. And this started almost 10 years ago now. And I think of it kind of as a uniform. I just go and actually, as I talk to some of the coaches at SMU, that one of them kind of noticed, George, you're wearing a suit again? Like, you wear a suit every day, really? And this concept came from sports. But when you see, an individual going into the locker room, right? NFL or NBA, right? What do you see? You see them dressed up in a suit, going ready to play the game, right? And then they change and they get their gear on, whatever their gear is for the game. And that ritual of putting on a suit, getting your confidence built up, getting your head and ready in the right place for the game, is something that's ritual. It's a tradition, and it puts you in a different frame of mind, frankly, from what you would be otherwise. And I think that every day is game day when it comes to cybersecurity. And so we ought to plan, and not to say that you have to wear a suit every day, but I think, again, that's part of being diligent, is thinking about all of the things in your life, right? Is it putting on your favorite perfume or cologne and feeling a little extra confident and connected? Is it the right pair of shoes or heels, right? And I think those things are small, but if that gives you a little boost, that's what we need. We need every little edge that we can get. And so again, I apologize in advance. I started out the conversation talking about a serial killer, and I'm going to end the conversation with talking about a devastating fire. So every up until the 1950s, there would be a fire pretty regularly that would kill lots of people, and in every event. They tried to treat the event with policy, with changes to building codes, and the fires kept happening over and over again. And one thing that changed, this is actually from a school fire in Chicago, and this image comes from actually, it was actually on the cover of Life magazine, and what we learned from that is the people didn't know what to do in an emergency. There were exits. They could have gotten out, but instead they stayed in their rooms. They were on the second floor or third floor. Some of them jumped out of windows, and they could have gotten out, right? But they didn't know what to do. And so instead of changing building codes, instead of doing all of these other things that hadn't worked in the past, the thing that came out of this particular fire is that they started doing fire drills, right? And today, every commercial building in the country does at least an annual fire drill. It's required, so that the occupants of the building know where to go and what to do, so that you in the moment you aren't trapped, or you don't feel trapped, and that's a big part of change. And so I think we can learn from fire drills and capture what's already in our DNA, which is what we want to do. We want to be secure. But today we don't do extensive cybersecurity drills for all employees, at least annually. We do a little bit of training. I think really, the tabletop exercise is the gold standard, right? Everybody gets to see that, gets to participate in it. So typically, tabletop exercises are really targeted only at executives, only at leaders in your organization. And I would say that that's not enough, right? If we want everyone to participate in cybersecurity, if we think that security is everyone's job, and I hope by now in the masterclass you agree with me, then I think all of us need to participate and help make a difference. So again, we go to the habit loop: prompt, habit, behavior, reward. and so in terms of diligence, I think of, at the beginning of events as well as at the end of events, right? So at the beginning, I can think about what I'm going to do, think about your journal, think about your random act of security that you were going to plan for. When is that trigger gonna hit you to make that plan? Then you do the plan, and then you make the reward. So um, you know my write down your prompts and behaviors, send them back. For me, my sample recipes were, before I go to bed, I'm going to write down one security goal for tomorrow. And maybe before you go to bed isn't specific enough for you. Maybe it's after I finish brushing my teeth before I go to bed. Maybe it's after I turn off the TV before I go to bed. One of those things should trigger you to write down your security goal for the next day, and then your reward could be spraying some lavender on your pillow. And as a total aside, I had a professor in college who had severe PTSD from Vietnam, and spraying lavender on his pillow was the only thing that let him sleep at night. And I mean, he tried literally hundreds of different things. So, just an extra bonus thing you get to learn today. But again, at the beginning of the year, plan a tabletop exercise. And then after you planned it and executed, take a vacation day to reward yourself. Um, Next week, we'll be talking about what I think is the most important cybersecurity habit, which is community. But we only have 3 habits left, so we're almost done. Hang in there, and we will see you next time. And I hope you stay well aware.